With Cindy Sheehan. Cindy has been here before and really needs no introduction. She's the, as I said, the peace mother from the United States who spoke out and represents, I think, the best interest and aspirations of the American people rather than the warmongers. Cindy?
I have to mention that I wouldn't be here in Stockholm again if it wasn't for the Swedish committee to free the Cuban Five. I'm actually here in Europe I went to Ireland and Northern Ireland, and I'm here now working on solidarity to free the Cuban Five. Quickly, the Cuban Five were free at the Cuban Five, the Cuban Five were three. The Cuban Five were 5 anti-terrorist activists that went from Cuba to Florida to infiltrate the terrorist cells of Cubans in Florida that plan acts of terrorism against the revolution in Cuba and the people of Cuba, which killed about 3,500 Cubans over the years since the revolution. So the Cuban Five went to Florida to infiltrate this group to stop the acts of terrorism. They found out information that could be of national security interest to the United States. So they reported it to the FBI. Instead of the FBI arresting the actual terrorists, they arrested the Cuban Five. And the Cuban Five have been now in U.S. prisons since 1990. They were arrested in 1998, convicted in 1999. And of course, it's one of the big reasons that I am in solidarity with this campaign is that my son, Casey, was told that he was going to go to Iraq to fight terrorism. And so instead of prosecuting the terrorists in the United States, the United States government is protecting the real terrorists and persecuting the ones who were fighting against them. So that's why I'm here. Very quick thing about the Cuban Five. And before I start, I'd like to express my sorrow to the doctor here and to all the people from Iraq here. I know there are many of you. And my condolences, and I think saying sorry is not enough for the devastation that my country has visited on the people of Iraq and the country there. There was no new statistic that you read that I haven't heard before, but still hearing it just like drives a knife into my heart. Every statistic is like bam, bam, bam. And my son, of course, was a U.S. soldier, but we have to understand that and when he joined in 2000, we're from a working class family in the United States, a poor working class family. And education in the United States was not a right, is not a right like it was in Iraq. My son felt to take the financial pressure off the family. He was recruited by a liar that made many promises to him that he broke, my son's military recruiter. So he joined the military to help pay for his college education. And then, of course, Bush happened and 9/11 happened. And Casey did not want to go to Iraq. He told everybody before he left, he was a Humvee mechanic, that he couldn't kill anyone. And then he was only there in Sadr City, Baghdad, for a few days on April 4th, 2004, when his unit, the 1st Cavalry, actually went into Sadr City and instigated trouble. They went as a show of force. They had just the change of command had just happened. They took over from the 3rd Armored Division in Germany, and so they wanted to go flex their muscles, and they went out into Sadr City and they actually provoked an uprising, which is something that's very common, I understand. Of course, my son was in the 3rd or 4th wave to go, and he was ordered to go. And he told his sergeant, he said, I'm not going to go. I'm just a mechanic. I'm not going. And so to Casey's credit, he refused the order that sent him to battle, and his commander actually dragged him onto the truck, and he was dead a few minutes later. Do I blame the Iraqi resistance for my son's death? No. I've never, ever blamed the people of Iraq or the Iraqi resistance. I blame my government. I blame the military. I blame the political forces that put my son in that situation. And I agree. We owe the people of Iraq so much. We owe them reparations. Anything the people of Iraq want from the United States, we owe them. But continuing the occupation is not one of the things we... So many people talk to me like, oh, we need to stay there because if the U.S. leaves, there's going to be chaos. The U.S. actually brought the chaos, from what I understand. And, you know, a lot of people, since we, you know, the war has allegedly ended, they say, Cindy, so now you see a free and happy and democratic Iraq. Don't you think your son's life was worth that? Well, my son's life was a personal tragedy to my family. But millions of Iraqis are dead or wounded. And it's not ever going to end anytime soon in our lifetime with the toxicity and the poison that we brought to your country. The deaths are going to continue. It's still in Vietnam. The U.S. left that country in 75. And people are still dying from the toxicity and poison. Not just in Vietnam, but of course, you know, the veterans that came to the United States, came back to the United States are dying from that. And so there's also this big controversy in the States among the activist movement. Still, everybody wants to take credit for ending the Vietnam War. You know, the vets that resisted want to take credit. The students that resisted want to take credit. The peace movement that resisted wants to take credit. The draft, we had a draft, so people say it was a draft that ended the war. Nobody in my country gives credit to the Vietnamese resistance for ending that war. Of course, it was the Vietnamese resistance that ended that war. And as somebody who works for peace against war, I have to also recognize a people's right to resist an occupation. I heard from a mother of an Iraqi who was in that struggle in Sadr City on April 4th, 2004. Her son was wounded, and he later died. And she told me, you know, Miss Sheehan, we're very sorry that your son was killed. We don't want to kill your young people. But you're occupying our country. You have to understand that. We would rather not kill your young people. But, so yes, an occupied people do have the right to resist an occupation. We also have to understand that Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, right? I remember I was here when he got it. I was being interviewed. And the guy, is the man here who was interviewing me that day? Anyway, I was being interviewed, and he looked at his BlackBerry or whatever he had. He goes, hey, guess what? I was like, what? He goes, Obama just won the Peace Prize. I would say, no, you're full of no, that did not just happen. You must be reading a spoof. You must be reading a spoof, because Obama could not have won the Nobel Peace Prize. And the man actually had tears in his eyes. He said, yeah, I'm not kidding. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. So, which, you know, is an absolutely ridiculous joke. But Obama did not want U.S. troops to leave the country. So now he's trying to take credit for ending that war. He's in a campaign now, right? So he's saying one of the big major things he did was get Osama, which I think is just another big lie and farce. But one of the big things he says is that he ended the war in Iraq. And like you said, it wasn't the agreement between Maliki and Bush. And if it was up to Obama, many more U.S. troops would still be there. But the U.S. could not negotiate with the government of Iraq that U.S. troops would have immunity for war crimes. If that was negotiated, trust me, we'd still at least have 50 or 60,000 more troops in Iraq. The last thing that Obama wanted to do was leave Iraq. I was sitting here listening to the report before me, and what came to mind was in George Bush's last trip to Iraq when Muqtada al-Zaidi threw a shoe at him. And I was hoping that nobody here would throw a shoe at me. But I wouldn't blame you if you did. But I went to Texas once. You know that I camped out in front of George Bush's ranch in Crawford, Texas, right? Calling for an end to the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. I camped there many, many times. I always went to Washington, D.C. I was arrested 12 times at least when George Bush was president in Washington, D.C. I spent a lot of time in jails there. And I always thought, isn't this really interesting that my country is involved in several wars of aggression saying that we're taking democracy to these countries when I get arrested for trying to exercise my rights to free speech, which is a hallmark supposedly of democracy, that my son was allegedly killed to spread freedom and democracy, but his mother can't even express her feelings without getting arrested. I can't go to D.C. anymore without getting arrested. I don't know what it is. Every time I go to that city, I end up getting arrested. And I'm totally innocent. I never chained myself to the White House fence. Never. I never have done that except that one time that I did that. But I want to tell you, I've only been arrested twice since Obama's been president. And the second time I got arrested, I spent 4 days in jail. And when I got out, they took us to trial. They took us to this hearing. Shackled, our ankles were shackled, our waists, we were shackled together, our wrists were shackled to our waists. And when I'm in jail for any length of time, the only thing that gets me through is just thinking that how many more people have it worse than I do, that have been tortured and have been in prison for years and in many torturous situations than I do. The worst thing that happens to me is they try to give me bologna, you know, and I don't eat meat. If I ate meat, why would I eat bologna? I don't even know what the heck it is. And so anyway, I went to Texas one time when George Bush wasn't. Oh, I want to tell you about Obama first. So anyway, I have this 4-day jail stay. I go in front of a judge, and Obama's attorneys want to give us a restraining order against the White House, against him really, a stay-away order. So I was one of the first activists, if not the first activist, to be banned from a perimeter around the White House. And so this is my free country, right? That if I cross that perimeter, I would have to go to jail for a minimum of 6 months just for crossing an imaginary line. And every time I went to the White House, the police would run up to me and they'd say, "Cindy, you know you have a stay-away order. You can't cross that line or you're going to go to jail." And I know that I really seriously annoy Obama. I went to Norway when he got the Nobel Peace Prize. I went to Martha's Vineyard when he was on vacation. And I'm saying, hey, just because you're a new guy doesn't mean we're going to cut you any slack on these invasions and these occupations. You know, you maybe inherited 2, but he has started so many more of his own. And so I had this stay away order, but I have to tell you, there was a book written about George Bush. And every time I went to D.C., I would take my bullhorn, you know, the magnifying megaphone thing, and I'd go right up to the fence and I'd yell at George Bush. I'd say, George Bush, you're a war criminal. George Bush, turn yourself in. George Bush, you know, whatever I would say to him. I just really love to harass him. And so one of the books said they were having a meeting in the Oval Office and they could hear my voice. So that just gave me encouragement to keep going back as often as I can, knowing that they could hear me. And so I think that's why Obama gave me that restraining order, because I did the same to him. Obama, bring the troops home. Obama, you have little girls. Think of them. Think of how you would feel. And so I think that's why I had the restraining order. But anyway, I was in Texas, and all the Secret Service, the people that protect the president know me. When I was in Texas protesting George Bush, I actually had my own Secret Service code name. You know, they give all the people they protect code names. But I had my own code name, and I found out it was the Tornado. So it's like, oh, the tornado's back, you know, the tornado's here again. And so my Secret Service name was the Tornado. So they all know me. One time I was being arrested, and one of them actually asked me for a date. And I said, are you kidding me? You have me in handcuffs, and you want my number? And he goes, well, maybe, you know, in better circumstances when you're not handcuffed, we can go out. And so anyway, when Bush wasn't president, he was speaking at a university in Texas. This war criminal, this monster, gets $100,000 US for speaking. Who would even want to hear him say anything for $1? I wouldn't pay him $1 to come speak to my group. I mean, you know, I might say, hey, George, I'll give you $1. And then I would put him under citizen's arrest. He's not very smart. He might fall for it. So anyway, I was talking to one of my Secret Service agent friends, and he came up to me and he was telling me about his son and asking me about my children and my grandchildren. And I said, you know, Agent so-and-so, can you get me in the speech that George Bush has given? Can you just kind of like sneak me in the speech? He's like, oh, Cindy, you know, I can't do that. I said, I just want you to get me close enough so I can throw one of my shoes at him. The Secret Service goes, I can put you in jail just for saying that, Cindy. You know I can't do that. So trust me, George Bush and his criminal cabal will not get away with what they did to Iraq. There are people actively working internationally and in the United States. Even if they don't get put into a prison of institutional making, we are isolating them where they can't go outside. They literally can't go speak anywhere without us being on top of them. You know, calling them to account for what they did. Recently, Cheney had to cancel a trip to Canada because they couldn't guarantee his safety in Canada. So they are prisoners, really. They are really prisoners. We can walk outside. We can see the sunshine. We don't have to be guarded. But they can't move freely in their own country. They are so despised. And really no American president can move around freely. So anyway, I will live the rest of my life trying to hold those criminals accountable. But right now, we still have wars we have to end. We still have innocent people we have to save. And we have to say, you know, George Bush, yeah, he was a war criminal. Dick Cheney's a war criminal. Crimes against humanity. Crimes against the peace. But you know what? They weren't the first U.S. presidents that have been war criminals. In fact, they were just a continuation of policies, really, that George Bush the first and Clinton put into practice regarding Iraq. But every one of U.S. presidents really could be charged with war crimes. I mean, what are we on, 44 now? You know, it's a rogues gallery of war criminals. And we have to realize that putting an American president or a former president on trial for war crimes would finally be justified. Truman dropped 2 atomic bombs. He started the Korean War. You know, he firebombed Tokyo and other Japanese cities. And the only reason that he wasn't charged with war crimes is they were the so-called victors. Right? It's the losers that get charged with war crimes. And that's what McNamara said. Robert McNamara was a colonel, I think, during World War II. The general was Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay told him, hey, if we lost this war, we would be hanging for war crimes. So even the military and politicians acknowledge that. But holding a U.S. president accountable, I think, would hold the entire system accountable. Because it's not just about the presidents, it's about the empire. It's about spreading empire. It's about opening new markets. It's about controlling a nation's population and their resources. And of course, divide and conquer is something that occupiers use always. A terrible situation just happened in Afghanistan the other day. A U.S. soldier, a sniper, walked off his base, walked to a village in Kandahar province, and killed, unprovoked, on a rampage, killed 16 Afghan civilians. He went into one home where there were 11 family members, systematically executed each and every one of them. 4 young girls under 6 years old. The only people in that family that weren't killed were the father and one of his sons because they weren't home. Going home to that kind of devastation, this massacre, must have been a terrible, horrible shock to this man. And of course I blame the soldier that did it. You know, he's on his 4th deployment. He's been to Iraq 3 times. God knows what he did in Iraq, right? He was only in Afghanistan since December. His 4th deployment. I don't excuse at all what he did. But the people that need to be held accountable are the ones from the top down. This troop, the soldier that did it, he needs to be held accountable. But so does the president and the commander-in-chief, we call him. And all of the people in between the commander-in-chief and this troop need to be held accountable for that war crime. Afghanistan is another place that the U.S. should not be in. It's another place that we're told that we'll be leaving soon. And when we leave, they'll be better off. But war ultimately causes atrocities. There will always be atrocities on both sides whenever there's war. And what we have to realize is people like me, if I had been more vigilant, my son never would have joined the military. And I wouldn't be here today. We as people have to, as mothers, as fathers, we have to be more vigilant. And I don't know so much about here in Sweden. It's not that much of a problem. But there are countries where, especially the United States, our unemployment is extremely high right now. In some places, unemployment's 50%. In the inner cities, where that's where the recruiters go. It's poor people, people of color, disadvantaged people. And they're told that they're going to get all these benefits and job training and education, and it's going to lift them out of poverty, and the military is sold as an opportunity. Well, my daughter, my next oldest child, actually was able to get a college education. She got her master's degree. She owes over $50,000 in loans so she could get that degree. Her brother wanted a college education. He's dead. So this is what our kids have to choose from. They have to choose from joining the military or going into lifelong debt just to get an education. They think that when they're going in the military, they're getting a job. They're getting job training. I saw a cartoon the other day, and it's soldiers on a Bradley tank. And they're saying, we can't leave Iraq right now because there's no jobs in the United States. So, this is a pitiful situation that our young people of the working class get into. Am I going to get an education? I don't have a job. I don't have health care. There's a case in the United States where a 43-year-old man rejoined the military. He was out of the military, but he rejoined it. You know why? Because his wife got cancer, and he lost his job. So he joined the military to get health insurance for his wife.
That's money. That's money.
To get insurance so his wife could be cured of her cancer and get treatment. That's a monstrous society. Yet we were told we were going into Iraq to improve their society, where education and health care was provided to the citizens. But it's not provided to the people in the United States. It's not a human right in the United States. It's a privilege. Right? Well, we all know that health care and education, housing, that's a human right. That's one thing that Gaddafi was providing to the citizens of Libya, using his oil wealth. The United States says we can't have that. That oil wealth belongs to the U.S. and to foreign oil companies, not the people of Libya. Right? So I forgot what I was talking about. I get so wound up about the hypocrisy of the United States.
Yeah.
It's just so hypocritical. And people always say we don't hate Americans, we hate the government of the United States. Well, sometimes I get so frustrated with people, my own fellow American citizens, because part of them know what's going on, but they don't care, and they support it because they profit off of it. Those are the evil ones. And then the rest of them don't know what's going on because they just don't give a shit. They could know what's going on, but they don't want to think about it. If everybody in my country could hear your story, I wish everybody in my country, because they seriously believe that we helped Iraq. They seriously believe that we're helping the people of Afghanistan. There was a peace group in the United States that went to Afghanistan. They came back and said, we have to stay to protect the women. Protect the women. Women and children are the ones that are hurt the most in occupations. Protect them from what? Save them from what? Their lives? Their children? It's ridiculous, the propaganda in my country. And the people want to believe it because they don't want to believe that we live in an evil country. that we live in a country that is the leading exporter of terrorism in the world, the United States. They don't want to believe that. They want to believe that if we do go into a country that we have good intentions, that we're there to help the people, that we're there to save the people, that we're there to liberate the people. I went to visit a U.S. senator. Her name still is, but she's not a U.S. senator anymore. Elizabeth Dole from North Carolina, I believe. And she's married to that Bob Dole guy. You guys remember Bob Dole, right? Anyway, I told Elizabeth Dole, I said, I'm here and I work because I think we need to end the occupation of Iraq. And she goes, you call it an occupation? That's how she talks. You call it an occupation? I said, what do you call it? She goes, a liberation. So really, according to Elizabeth Dole, you owe us reparations because we liberated the people of Iraq. And that's what the people in my country pitifully and pathetically believe. Huh?
That's what they're told.
Because that's what they're told, but they want to believe it. So they don't try and seek out the truth. Because they want to believe that if the United States does something, we're doing it for good. And if something like Haditha, Fallujah, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo, this incident in Kandahar, when U.S. troops in Afghanistan urinated on dead bodies, when U.S. troops in Afghanistan burned the Quran, when they desecrated the Quran in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib, when they had horrible torture. We want to believe that those are bad apples. Those are isolated incidents. No, the U.S. empire is the bad apple. And those are not isolated incidents. Still think what?
That America is a good country and they are for freedom and democracy, helping the world. Year after year.
No, we're not for freedom and democracy. We're for profit and domination. And Swedish people believe that. I don't think any Swedish person in here believes that, but I'm pretty sure that most people want to like believe that, but it's just absolutely not true. The motivating force in the United States is profit, money, 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 money. The 1%, as the Occupy movement identified them, they don't care about the people of Iraq. They don't care about the people of Afghanistan. They don't care about the people in Libya, Palestine, anywhere. They don't even care about the people in the United States. What they care about is profit. And we can talk about, national resistance movements to end occupation, but we need an international resistance movement to end the 1%. Right? The 1%. How can 1% dominate 99% of the people? Because 1%, they own the military, they own the propaganda. And if the major thing, if we can overcome the propaganda, then 99% of the world can take back what really belongs to us. And I don't want the one, people always say, oh, Cindy, you're just jealous because you just want to be rich. I have to say that after my son was killed, I was his beneficiary and I did get a lot of money. But I spent every penny of it in the movement. I spent every penny of it. I bought property in Crawford, Texas because they told me I couldn't protest at the side of the road anymore. So if they tell me I can't, I said, solution, buy property. They can't say I can't be on my own property. So I've spent everything that my son gave to me in trying to make this world a better place. So I don't want to be like the rich. I want the rich to be like us. I want it to be a more egalitarian world. And if the 99% are the ones that have to pay for the crimes and the wars of the 1%, And it's only going to stop when we finally resist that completely and totally. But the first thing we have to do is overcome the propaganda. And I hope that there's a video available of this talk, because it's good to talk here to everybody that agrees with us. I mean, I think everybody in here probably agrees with everything that we've just said. But the rest of the Swedish people who believe all that crap, and the rest of the people in my country who believe that we went to Iraq to liberate that country, need to see what you just, the presentation that you just made right now. But I'm gonna quit because we're getting late, so we can take questions. Many people have believed that it was far more U.S. troops killed than the 4,500 they tell us. I've heard of people in Iraq that say that a lot of Mexican nationals were recruited and just left. If they died, they were just left there. So that's something I really think needs to be investigated. But to me, the amount of U.S. troops and personnel that were killed or wounded take a way back seat to the people of Iraq who were killed and wounded. And again, my heart goes out to your country and the devastation, and there has to be a call in the United States for reparations. There's not a call for reparations right now, but there has to be. You know, we're acting like, you know, we were some big good guys that went in there, and everything that we did was good, but reparations is something that we need to, as a movement, need to take up the call for. So thank you.